pulls you in and doesn't let go.
All right, hello. Welcome back to the carousel. I know it's been a while. I have been delinquent in doing episodes because I've just been so busy. So yeah, I am here today with a familiar name, PCM Christ. Great author, great writer, cool guy. Welcome back to the show, PCM.
Thanks for having me, man.
Of course. All right. So you hit me up and wanted to talk about this topic of subversion. So why don't you go ahead and just tee this up and we'll get right into it.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, it was sort of based on my response to another carousel episode with Jesse Larkin and King Cringe. That was not focused on subversion, though their podcast is Subverting the Subverters, which started an interesting conversation. But really, it was sort of the gist of it seemed to be trying to recognize where, if anywhere, right wing art can go. What are its praxis, and so subversion in general is something that I've been interested in. I like most of my major work. And we can talk about it throughout if it becomes relevant, but most of my major pieces have been subversive in some way, like even from the beginning. And so I thought, especially, I had mentioned this, like even working in advertising at this point, I sort of consider everything. It's all battle of names at this point. And I thought, even being in advertising, it might be an interesting conversation to have with you. Plus, it sort of lined up with the episode that you'd done with them.
Totally. All right. So let's dig right into it. What's your take on subversion in the right wing art sphere?
Well, let me just spurg out then, if I can.
Go for it.
Right. So to do so, right, like to really sort of understand like what we're messing with here is, I think you kind of have to understand, like, to pull back and understand certain meta narratives, like to where we're at and just like of the human race, right? And sort of what probably the most ancient one that still leads up to this day, and then we get into the 20th century, right, would be the mono dash, right? And so what happened was all of our narratives, going back to the Byzantine, going back to the more localized, where you can identify the nation states, if you will, and the civilizations that produced them, they were all conceived in isolation, right? And the main thread through the world of how we get to where we are is, as I said, the mono dash, which is what unites the tribes of Judah, what unites the middle kingdom of China, right? What unites the tribes of Islam, what unites the barbarian states, and tribes of Europe, right? What unites the communists, right? What unites National Socialists, right? What it comes down to is, as the world expands, as knowledge of narratives expand, right? Whereas previous perspectives on the world, previous lenses on the world are exposed to other lenses, they will wrestle with those. I mean, you even get this in religious denomination, and these lenses wrestle with each other, and one either sort of goes to war and subjugates the other one as best as it can, usually through physical means, just by wiping out the locale, or it's adopted, or it's completely replaced, right? On a larger scale. As I said, everything that united the civilizations and disparate groups that I mentioned, right? And so this is the way, this is the meta narrative of history. This is the meta narrative of culture. And what we get when we get to the 20th century, and this is important because it allows for everything that comes in the 20th century that we consider the narratives of the West having been subverted, right? And so we get the Industrial Revolution. We get the whole Nietzsche, God is dead, right? And the way that I'm going to frame that is that when God is dead, what it means is that mankind has become centralized, and that the divine interventions, the divine supplications, the divine will, and we're leaving out, and I'm not an atheist, by the way, but what it does is it's replaced by science, right? And so previously my poor child was dying at age 3 of tuberculosis, and we didn't have medicine. And so then he gets pneumonia, and his lungs fill, and I pray to God, and he dies a horrible death, and it was God's will. And that's also the nature of the world as it was understood, until we just figured out that science can fix this, right? It's no longer God's will. It is mankind's hand in everything. And then, of course, culminating, as far as God goes, it culminates in the atomic bomb, right? We are now planet destroyers, not planet creators, but we can destroy the shit. That sort of recognition that we can't create a world, but we can destroy it, feeds into the same sort of eugenic considerations of the authoritarian regimes that come up in the early 20th century, right? And so now we're looking at ourselves, we're looking at culture, we're looking at our civilizations as people who are sort of without responsibility, right? It's the same as AI, right? No one feels like there's a responsibility to go anywhere, right? We've actually put forces of nature into play that ironically we perpetuate, but we don't control, right? So we're still subject to nature, even continuing. So then we're at nature. And then here's where the interesting part happens, right? Is because we have the only surviving really, and there are reasons for this beyond, but we get democracy, right? America kind of comes out of World War II, relatively unscathed, capitalistic democracies. But then we get, and this just follow it with me, right? And we'll lead up to today. Is we get what is in the 50s. This is not subversion, right? We have not subverted ourselves on purpose, right? What we have done is we've had revolutions. We also get in the 50s, we get the rebellion against such things. But starting really, I think it starts with Freud, because it's a level of self-analysis and awareness that just people did not have. It's a deconstruction of self. And what happens is, you'll notice if you do the studies, like where did woke come from? Where did everything that we're dealing with now, right? Postmodernism, where did it all come from? It starts in literature, right? And I mentioned the importance of narratives. We have the structuralists come up in the 60s, right? We have the deconstructionists. And so what happens is, and this is where the rebellion against modernism, right, which was participation in one's self-created narrative, right? It was autonomous. Postmodernism decides that actually we are nothing without structures, right? And so whether it be politics, whether it be cultural narratives, the thing that matters most, and this applies to the art discussion that y'all started to have, was that now we have narrative control. Now we have something that we can aim towards, that is fueled by this idea of progressivism, right? Now, as far as the academics in the 60s go, the black humorists, the deconstructionists, Derrida, all the sort of classics, where this starts as far as theory goes, we get to a point where that is the only thing new. It's the only thing propelling us. And so the leftism, through counterculture, both in academia and in popular culture, starts creating art, and it creates narratives. And once again, just let me emphasize the point. This all started with literature, right? Everything started with the written word. And so then eventually, politically, that's a different topic. But we get to the point. I mean, I'm barely old enough, but you probably remember like up until probably like the 2000s, maybe even past then, is the right was sort of conservative, but it was also big business, right? Like the political narratives where the right is big business, the left is big government, right? That was where you get sort of, the anti-corporation stuff. But then media leftist narratives were still popular, right? Because they were still fighting for something. They had an enemy. And so then we get to, you mentioned the fact that the left at this point, and we're kind of catching up to the modern day, the left went over the edge, right? Not just in their censorship and their morality. They went over the edge in two ways. One, they won by winning, right? And this is sort of my big sort of anti-usual normal right-wing stance. I don't think there's anything to conserve anymore. I think it is actually lost. But I also find that liberating. Two, by going over the edge, this is where we get stuck culture, right? Renewal and forms of progressivism, not necessarily the political kind, are from the youth, right? This is the most obviously seen through music. And so both of these traditions, academia destroyed everything, and now people are continuing to try to participate in academia. Culturally, we go over the edge. When you talk about, fat black chicks and Calvin Klein, it's because, fashion is sort of the most obvious part because there's nothing else to do, right? It's not even have to be as gross as it is or whatever, and virtue signaling. Like there's nothing else to do, right? And so they're going for a form of progressivism via rebellion, where really all they can do is not do the things that they did. And my whole thesis is recognizing the fact that the left has become the conservatives. They have become not right wing, right? But they have become the institutions, and the right via, starting with Frog Twitter, etc., have sort of tried to rebel against it, but like they literally can't, right? And I will tell
why can't they?
Well, because they can't have any narratives other than like the restoration to restore like a rightful place, right? Like the whole like belief in hierarchy assumes that the only narrative they can have, there's no enemy. The only thing they can have is restoration. And that doesn't work because the only restoration they can see is sort of this, conservatism. It's a return, right? There's nowhere else to go. And it certainly doesn't have any answers for the narratives that I'm talking about. Now, as far as, the sort of Nietzschean, eugenic, we're all science.
Yeah. What about that?
And,
right.
You have eugenics, right? And that's kind of it. But as far as cultural narratives go and like, grand scale, right? This is why Nietzsche worked, because it was individualistic, right? But people want to assert Western civilization. They want to assert dominance. I mean, I'll give you an example, man. Well, we can say that towards the end. This is in relation to the East Asian tweet. I don't know if you want to say that or we can go there now.
Yeah, sure. No, go there. Go ahead. I was saying that East Asians are becoming. It's becoming like a high class, or not high class, but classier coded to be East Asian. And people loved that tweet. I mean, I live in Pasadena, so it's very obvious here. But growing up, Asians were basically dry cleaner Americans. There was no clout to be had in being Asian at all, at least in my experience. There was no such thing as like rich Asians. They were just this kind of vague. It wasn't like good to be Asian. Yeah, it was like, okay, whatever. Yeah. You're just basically like Mexican, except you're a pussy, and like it wasn't like good. But now you really do see it starting to be like actually cool to be East Asian, not Indian, but like Korean, Chinese,
Right.
Japanese.
Right.
Those three, I just think they're so ascendant on the world stage, and they're so ascendant in America that now, like, really, Asian shit is actually starting to be like high touch and like
Sure.
luxury ish a little bit. I mean, Japanese
Yeah.
has always been like that, of course, but now I mean just like in general.
Right.
Which I think is cool. I'm down. Like I don't care. I mean, fucking white
Nor do I.
people fucked it up. So like if white people didn't want the crown, then decided to, destroy themselves.
Okay, good. Yeah. Okay, so we're exactly on the same page then, right? So like, let's
Yeah.
once again like trace this narrative, okay? And then we'll kind of see where the conversation goes, because then we're like at our point in history.
Yeah.
So
for
like
sure.
you have like Japan, you have a presence, right? Like they kind of get pulled over first because of the war, right? Where they were, with the insane economy that they produce. Now, let's ignore all that and just go straight up culture, right? So you get anime, you get awareness, you get general awareness of Japan. And it sort of stays like that. Like people, when it comes to China, it's all like sort of political. You know what I mean? It's foreign policy stuff. Like, people, millennials, I don't think grew up being like, oh, what they knowing shit about China or Korea. And so then we get to YouTube, right? And Asians, and I think that, and I mean, you don't have to like it, but I think that Asians have kind of, in their way, followed the cultural vacuum that blacks did, but then blacks kind of dropped the ball like really hard in the past 5 years. And so but then there's a space. But let's get back to YouTube, right? Like 2000s, 2010s. East Asians started having money, right? What I mean? They're now in the suburbs, right? We also have immigrant populations like that actually have money from East Asia.
Yeah.
And so then American Asians find that they all of a sudden they have cultural holds in self media via YouTube, right? And so a lot, and there's not a huge, outside of Asian Americans, it's not a huge population, like a huge audience, but all of a sudden they start getting sort of solidarity, right? They have these narratives that they find commonality in and they find expression from. And it's this new experience that hasn't been expressed via media. And so you have a lot of Asian channels get pretty big on YouTube. And so then as that increases, you get awareness from Americans, you get awareness inside of the media. And conveniently for everyone, sort of as the 90s take off, and especially in the 2000s, it's no longer cool to just like shit on foreign cultures, right? And so a lot of people are, millennials and Zoomers are pretty open, right? Zoomers, as most of the Zoomer waffen exist, they're all kind of used to being therapists to each other. And they're open, right? Like if you start talking about shit, they're going to listen to it. And so then it's like, oh, okay, so here's like these narratives, and I'll get to the really, really important part, which kind of spells the death for the West. But you get this exposure, right? You get curiosity, and then in the cultural void, you get things that are cool, right? You start getting, it starts on Netflix, right? Netflix had months where and I'm a cinephile, man. I know you are too. Like Korea sort of replaced Hong Kong, right? As far as the East Asian cinema go, like Korea in the 2000s was immaculate shit as far as cinema goes. And so then people started picking that up on Netflix. And then, chicks get into K-dramas. And then blah, blah, blah. You can sort of see where it goes from here, right? I don't need to expel that part. Then China's coming up. China might be too autistic to sort of translate culture. But I think, it'll come as the ladies doing a pretty good job of it. Like Chinese social media, the youth of China are fucking sick as far as using the internet goes. But here, so we get to the point where we're sort of in our current state. But what is it about Asia, right? Is not only is it remarkably aesthetic, right? Like everything, if you've ever been to any East Asian cities, man, like they're aesthetic as hell. Like they're gorgeous. And it's not just, Tokyo's clean because of demographics. There is an East Asian sensibility when it comes to design, when it comes, and it's born out of like the Tao, right? Like harmonies and all this other shit. But even their cigarettes, their cheapest cigarettes are pretty. And so then we're in the internet. And here's my big drop is You have aesthetic populations, right, that have money, that are respectable, right? Most people, when people start bitching about shit, they're not bitching about Asian. And you have respectable populations that are obviously competent, but then they're aesthetic as hell, which is perfectly premiered onto the internet. But then you realize that these populations, especially China, were raised from birth to essentially be in competition with millions, if not billions of people. And when you consider that laid onto the internet, this is why they can survive. This is why Asians, they have the technological side, they have the social media, right? The idea, Western assertion of individualism cannot survive an algorithm. They're not used to, we're not used to the void, right? We're not used to not mattering. We're not used to being in competition with one another in the same way. And so we have these sort of ascendant populations in these ascendant countries that are perfectly aesthetic for the internet, and they're perfectly primed to survive this sort of like singular experience and expression that we're all dealing with. And so then we talk about white people dropping the ball. It's like, oh, we invented the internet. Yeah, but you're not doing shit with it.
Right. So where do you see where do you but how does this relate back to the notion of subversion?
Because you have to know the narratives to know what you're playing and to know what you're actually subverting, right?
Okay.
So if this is the world that we're living in, then we look at the right wing narrative, right? Whether it's art, whether it's politics, and by contrasting that with the way it's working outside of is, oughts, and should be's and was, then all of a sudden we can see like, okay, like this is the actual playing field. It's not. It becomes much more than a dichotomy, right? The only sort of subversion the right has is not being the left at this point.
Right. I think that's true, and I think that from where I see it, what sort of has dawned on me recently, especially given like where the dissident right went, which was nowhere. It's like the whole thing's a fucking joke. It's a joke. And I think that that's like basically what Yarvin is saying. He's just having a very elaborate way of saying that the right wing in America is a joke. It's not real. There's nothing there. The only thing that is there is, as you're saying, not being the left. That is what the right is. The right is just not the left. And it has no ability to do anything, and it never will. I think that's what I've seen. It's not gonna. This train is not gonna stop. It's unstoppable. You can't stop this train. We're basically just waiting around for war, and then once we get war, everything will reset. It'll be glorious and horrible and all that stuff. But it's too far gone, man. It's like I think we're seeing this with Trump. Like I still love Trump, but none of this is real. Nothing happened. There's no stopping the train. The train to socialism is not going to stop. It's just going to happen. At least that's where I'm at.
No, I think so. I mean, the sort of the saddest part in my mind, and I think this is just part of the social, and we can kind of dive into the subversion stuff as far as narratives go and all that, but the saddest part is sort of like the worship of the elites via the right, and realizing like, and this is the Yarvin thing, right? But you're not one, right? Like people, yeah. And I mean, I write
Yarvin thinks he is one. Yarvin talks constantly about
no, but that's the whole freaking thing, though, man. Like Yarvin's whole thing is basically like, hey, rich people, new quote unquote elite, pretend you're aristocrats. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's what it is. He's like, it's literally, it's LARPers aristocrats until you kind of fake it to make it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's true.
And people want right wing billionaires, but then if let's pretend a billionaire is like far right, right? You are scum. You know what I'm saying? I am here. You are there. Why the fuck should I sponsor your book? Why the fuck should I sponsor your gallery? Unless you want to go with the Medici's, like, you could probably get by with Elon if you like made it all about him, right? If you
Yeah,
want to
but
like,
again, like this to me, everybody talks about this all the time, and this to me is not so much about like, it's not even that the right wing billionaires don't get it, right? Because they do get it. The right wing billionaires do get it. And you know what's crazy? I just learned this the other day. Like the whole donor class, right? We think of like the donor class. It's actually all right wing. It's really weird. Like if you like actually look at who the biggest donors are, for the most part, it's almost all right wing people. So it's actually not true that there's no right wing billionaires and they're not giving any money to anybody. Blah blah blah. I don't think that's true. It's more
far right then.
Well, not. I mean, there's far right, right? I mean, like, what is far right? What does far right even mean? I mean, what's so funny is, yeah, far right. Yet, if you are a far right billionaire, you're gonna still have a bunch of longhouse women running your organization. They're gonna call the shots. You're not gonna do anything actually far right. I mean, yeah, there's probably a couple billionaires out there that like give money to Fuentes, right? But like, that they have to do it in secret. They have to do it totally secretly, right?
Sure. And I mean, I'm not even trying to open up about, why don't we have billionaire donors, right? The point kind of factually is like people are like, we're the elites, right? Like that's the far right thing, right? We're the elites, but then like you're not.
No, they're not. Exactly. They're so not. And whether there even is elites, I don't even know. I mean, I think there is to some degree, but
I call them the institutional class. Like at this point, I don't know as though there's actual elites as we used to have.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of an American thing, that we just don't have aristocrats, and the aristocrats that we do have don't want to be aristocrats. They want to be tech founders, and actors.
No,
look at Hollywood. Hollywood's like half elites, like the daughters of elites and the sons of elites. It's like that's what they do. They don't want it. We're such a kulak nation that not working for us is such a like bad thing. So our elites, as elite as they are, always have to like pretend to have jobs, or they have to actually have real jobs, like being an actor.
Right.
So
well, that's kind of what I talked about too, as far as the right goes, right? Like as far as any narratives of restoration, right? Like even the sort of elite narratives of Europe, which get out, but it's just being part of something for a long time. Like that's it. That's literally it. And so, even subverting is, where I think we're kind of getting to it, right? To where, okay, if there aren't elites and if there is no elite class, right? If you're not it, then sort of what is the way forward? And this doesn't have to be, it can't just be politically, right? It's just to like survive the own shit. Like, the masses and all of the Twitter addicts, right? Myself included, right? We can doom scroll ourselves all the way to death, right? But the shit chugs on. And I think that this is why land is coming up, is that land. I don't know how familiar you are with him, but but
he is having a moment for sure. I'm a little familiar. I'm not that familiar with him. But yeah,
well, even avoiding like spurging out on things, right? The whole point is like if nothing else, it's sort of embrace the internet, right? It's sort of the only way out is through to where, and he's been really on a sort of Gnostic Calvinism kind of thing right now. Yeah. But as far as the way forward goes, and this is the fun part, but it's also more difficult to talk about, because when we talk about those narratives I talked about, what we talked about is this is what's been subverted. Right. And so then we get to the point where it's like, okay, well, what's next? And, that is a much more interesting, but much more difficult conversation to have. Right. I mean, even the goals of the current counterculture via the right are okay. Like, and, and I'm fully in support, right? Like, remigration, like all this shit. But like I said, like I'm pulling way back. I don't actually, when in this hypothesis and these theories, I don't give a shit, other than what's the consequence, right? If America goes back to being 90% white, 50% of those people are the people that we're always talking about are trying to kill you, send you to gulags. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing here. Like it's pie in the sky shit. And
Yeah.
so are there, and I mean, and I'm like I said, I mean, I hope it's kind of obvious. I don't know if I've been profound, but I've thought about this a lot. And, you know, I have some ideas as far as internet use, like with a couple essays coming out regarding the internet, regarding the absolvance of self. And sort
What
of
do you mean by that?
maybe
What do you mean the
maybe
absolvance of
even
self?
I'm sorry.
What do you mean the absolvance of self?
I'll touch on it briefly because it's in the essay and I don't want to like fuck it up. But basically there's a right-wing notion that I found, and it's Nietzschean, but Yukio Mishima really kind of carried it out. And there's a really, really good book. It's sort of a survey of him. It's called Mishima Aesthetic Terrorist. And
That sounds cool.
the guy Rankin does a really interesting thing wherein rather than sort of do the classic commentary and hot take on his works and the spectacle of his life, what he does is from his earliest writings he traces his thought, which is very consistent throughout, as you would kind of expect from him. But as far as his actual life and his development of thought and expression of it, like throughout his entire life, so it's much more following his sort of intellectual trajectory leading to his seppuku,
Right.
rather than collegiate analysis. And one of his really big things was he called it the body of the poet. And he said that a poet's existence is actually inside out, in that his basically a poet, a poet capital P, right? So artist is inside out, in that like his muscles, nerves, and sinew are on the outside, and he his core, his protected self, is on the inside. And what that allows him to do via art is he believed that one's existence, right, not just its expression of life, but one's life actually has to mirror their sensibilities, like a centralization of ego. And so that, and this, Bap is a good example. If I know you're familiar with him, but like Bap is a good example of kind of sort of living out what he thinks, making his life like congruent. And I think that his metaphor for the capital P poet is exactly the experience of being online. And so the absolvance of self, Milady's never touched on Mishima and stuff, but as far as their sort of network singularity, the absolvance of self and the participation in the internet is that to actually participate, you can lurk, but in the end, it's a participation thing. It's all expression as an artist in some form. At least to actually survive it, right? You could just be a reply guy and like get mad at shit. But if you're going to have any sort of life online, then that analogy is perfectly apt.
So where do you see the right's identity shifting in the near future? I guess is what I would be curious about. The culture right.
I think the right eventually dissolves. I think the right eventually, if anything, it's going to be the continuation of a hierarchy, but there's going to be actual people chosen. All right, there's going to be not even, I'm talking about culturally, right? Like we're all I don't like the idea of atomization. I don't know if people are as lonely in the sense that people think they are, other than just like dopamine starved. But as you get, and this is sort of where my work comes in, is as you get to people online who can express themselves with the capital P poet, then you're going to get generative ideas, right? And whether or not it matters what's going to matter are the people that can originate ideas and memes and culture, but then continue it rather than just sort of be absolved, because it's going to be mimetic, it's going to be reproduced, it's going to be changed. And so as far as the right goes, because they're so reliant on hierarchy, then they'll fall into the same trap of just the algorithm and the sphere. But I think that like the right why I am, after all I can say this, right, like why am I inherently right wing is my belief in like a biological reality, right? I think there is such a thing as nature, and however that nature to be expressed online is a completely different thing than biological reality. And I've said before, like if a narrative requires or involve, or well, I'm not going to say involved, if a narrative requires collapse to be instituted, then that's fine, but I don't really care, because if it doesn't collapse, it's worthless. Like I just no longer give a shit. I'm not willing to entertain it. I don't see any reason to think about it. And so this is where I find a lot of freedom and artistic liberation, is that because narratives are no longer localized, because we have full global exposure, then you can I mean, I don't have to say this sounds smart, but you can do whatever you want, and you can draw from everything. And I'm a big William Blake guy as far as mythologizing, celebrating, and considering one's own experience of life to be divine. And I think that the more people can either showcase you can share it, but what's really going to matter is being able to showcase your own experience, right? If you can, I'll give an example. This kind of started with Wallace, right? Like, if you read any David Foster Wallace, then people really loved Wallace because they're like, holy shit, this is how this guy thinks, right? Like he wrote maximalist shit, and he's like, this is what it's like to be inside of a hypersensitive, detail-oriented genius.
Yeah. Totally.
Whether that was true or not doesn't really matter, right? That was the appeal.
Yeah, that was the appeal.
Inside of a head.
Yeah. Right.
And so whether it's aesthetic, whether it's, sort of spiritual, right? You see the rise of religion and Christianity in the West right now. And that's for a lot of reasons, but I think it's still pertinent to what we're talking about, to where if you can make people, this is the take economy too, right? Like, how does he see the world? And this is where people burn out, is because they don't have a lens. They have thoughts, they have opinions, but they don't have a lens to see things through. And so the entirety of the internet is eventually going to dissolve into a higher form of content producer. And I don't mean AI. I don't necessarily mean videos. I'm talking about, I would say experience, right? I would say experience. I don't want to, but I'm going to say experience.
Well, I had a guy on here named Daniel Keller, cool guy, friend of mine. He's the sloptimism guy. And his postulation along the exact lines of what you're saying is that what an entertainer is going to be in the future is like somebody who lives, it's going to be like someone who lives in a virtual reality and you're following their point of view, right? Like that's going to be a great creator. What?
That's Keller, right?
Yeah, Daniel Keller. Yeah.
Okay.
And he like that'll be the creators of the future. It's basically the creators of the future will be like people who are in war in a video game, and that will be
sure.
That will be the people that you follow.
It's an interesting question whether or not, because it'll probably involve AI mostly. Almost it has to, whether or not those are, if we get the same sort of auteur corporate, like Hollywood production auteurs, or whether it's just all the Hong Kong system, like the Hong Kong studio system, where they just kind of own everybody for so long. Yeah, I can see. Have you seen Psycho-Pass, the anime?
No, what's that?
You should check out Psycho-Pass, man. It's
Psycho-Pass.
Yes, it's excellent. And the anime, it's from like 2012, I think. And the general premise doesn't really relate to what we're talking about. It's just follows sort of the police of the future, but where everyone has basically a social credit score, and this becomes it's not overly concerned with ethics, surprisingly and happily, so much as what a world like that looks like. But the sort of main antagonist uses people like you just described, people that are sort of mimetic warlords, not literally in war, but in sort of futuristic chat rooms to where they become celebrities and to where the antagonist is using these to manipulate the populace, even to go outside and to ruin their own social credit score and for devious means. And, it's very plot based in that way. But its conception of the future as basically all incurring online. Even the police, sort of, their guns won't work unless, the Sybil is the name of the program that runs society, including dictate, what your job should be. And Sybil they call it a crime coefficient, where the gun has to register, Sybil has to register this person at various levels of danger, of criminality. So the internet is a constant. I don't even know. It's not even the internet, but an online. The online is a constant influence and presence inside of like every decision they make.
That's cool.
And it's also just a really good story too.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. Have you seen this new show, Pluribus?
I have not.
So it's the new Vince Gilligan show. So Vince Gilligan did Breaking Bad. And I don't think he's done a show. I might be wrong about this, but I don't think he's done an actual show since Breaking Bad. And so this is like, I think, the first like full show that he's done. And it is so good, dude. It's so good. And it's like it's such a like commentary on the Borg, what we would call the Borg. Like,
right.
Not necessarily the online, but like the brainless or like the mindless sort of blob that is globalism, kind of, it's so good. It just came out, and it's like it's going to be like a massive hit because it's just like really, really well done. And I don't usually like thought experiment shows and stuff like this, but this one is just like so well done.
That's it. Yeah, I'm looking at the Wikipedia right now. Man, that sounds excellent. It's funny that he put in Albuquerque again.
Yeah, but I mean, it exists like everywhere. It's great. Like the tagline is the world's like grumpiest woman, or the world's like the most unpleasant woman has to save the world from happiness. Which is fucking genius, because it's like, it really is fucking genius. Like the way that it's set up, it sounds really like stupid kind of if you just hear the pitch. Like I'd be like, oh my God, I so don't want to see that. But the way that it's actually done, it's really about, it's very obviously like about sort of groupthink, and like it's super like COVID. You can very much tell he's like commenting on COVID people,
Nice.
And it's kind of similar to what you're saying. It's like, I don't know, man. I think, I wasn't sure what was going to happen with art. I think that what I'm now seeing basically is that the right was never going to make any art, man. And it doesn't matter because, like, again, Pluribus. Is Pluribus a right-wing show? No. But it's still good because it's shitting on what's bad, right? It's shitting on brainless globo homo. That's basically what the show is shitting on. It doesn't mean that it's a right-wing show, right? I mean, the people on our side would like to imagine that it is, but it's not actually a right-wing show. And I think that it's like real right-wing art to me is something like that. That's just really good. It's just really fucking good. And that
I think it has to be
right-wing.
good. Maybe. I mean, I think the right-wing part might be the sort of separation. Like this is sort of the only right that I see left is gatekeeping, right? So, I mean, Milady's a good example of this. Are you high enough IQ to understand this shit? Even in Pluribus, from what you've described, it's sort of like, hey, it doesn't have to present it as like, you're all mindless vassals. Maybe it does, But the
Yeah.
idea of, this is better, I mean, and it might be democratic in that, we want everyone to be unplugged from the Borg, right? So that
Yeah.
might be the only right-wing stance left is going to be whatever gatekeeping goes on. And I mean, that might be absolutely horrific in its scale when you really think about it, in that none of us are the true elites. So like, even politically, it's sort of, you look at the Europeans and you're like, the frustration is, why is there not one person, right? Why is there not one like British prime minister who's been like, wow, people really hate this. Maybe this is a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, this goes back to the whole like, elitist thing, right? Like, you're not that. You know what I mean? You're not dictating the future of countries against the will of the citizens of that country. And so whether it's a desperate grab for hierarchy online, such as a Twitter follower count, maybe that becomes the only hierarchy left. And then that way, anything that celebrates it or keeps people out is sort of the only right-wing thing left.
Gatekeeping is a right-wing act. Do you think that individualism is right-wing?
Only if well, individualism in the classic sense of it, we're all individuals and autonomy. No, individualism as in, the sort of Ubermensch stance. Yes. Like as soon as you're willing to say, I'm not that and I'm better than that, then you've sort of gone like a right-wing thing, which is necessary for establishing power, right? Like you can even say that the leftists did that, right? It's like, well, I'm not a racist. So then you're like, okay, like hierarchy has to exist in some sense. And that's why they were able to take over the culture, right? It's like, no, we went to college, right? We don't believe in God. You know what I mean? These backwater fucks. And so, so there's going to be to establish power, to have a foothold in power. I think hierarchy in some sense is inevitable, but maybe we're at the point, and this is why the right can exist in that sense, is that yes, there is a hierarchy and you kind of just have to pick what's yours. Which goes also into a collectivism, like the, are you, like, we'll talk about it just because we're talking about the far right, as far as America, it's like white nationalists for the most part. It's like, okay, are you white, but you're willing to go against like white narrative, right? Because really, I mean, all we're doing is like, it's just right Maoism, right? Like on both sides of the fringe of politics, it's right-wing Maoism. You know what I mean? It's just, it's white, excuse me, not right-wing Maoism, white Maoism. And it turns out, with the struggle sections and the hatred of not necessarily the elites as far as money goes, but the intelligentsia, right, the priest class, struggle sessions all day from both sides. And like that's where we're at when people have fears of authoritarianism. It's like, okay, this is it. There's a hierarchy. People are desperate. That all hierarchies have been crushed other than money and influence online, which even then you're still subject to the algorithm and the engineered world that we use. And that's why people are freaking out for it, right? And then that's kind of the thing that drives me insane is you can agree with this shit, but it's still so predictable, right? If in 2015 you have anti-white narratives, right, you're going to have, white backlash, right? And rightfully so. Like, are we all getting replaced, man? I think we kind of are, yeah. But I'm saying, once again, pulling back, right? Just pulling back from how did this shit form? Like, that's exactly it. You know what I mean? And so when you say, excuse me, when you talk about, waiting for war and nothing ever happened, it's just because like the people, it's all impotence, right? The people online, they can't do anything. It's like, oh, we scored a goal. The White House is, memeing this shit, tweeting memes. Half the time people find cringe. But at the same time, it's like, it's not affecting anything. Your Britain is still doing what they're doing, right? The leaders are still doing what they're doing. Blah, blah, blah. The actual elites, if you want to call them, the institutional class is still doing what they're doing. And so we're all populist at this point, right? We're all clamoring. It's a crab bucket.
Yeah.
And I think that is just the reality. And the only way to do it is you just do the Nietzschean thing of self-assertion, right? Like, you abandoned collective entirely. And, in my case, right, like I hesitate to call myself an artist. I'm a writer, but, literature's fucking dead. I'm not going to bullshit myself. Literature's absolutely
Right.
dead. But that's where I try to expand my skill set and what I can do and use tools. But once again, this is where I find fun is it's all comes down to narrative, right? Literature is dead. The necessity for narratives is not. And that's everything I do is just me
that's true.
doing narratives. And it, like you said, they do have to be good. They have to ring true or at least novel. They have to give people like the experience. And I think that's sort of the only thing left, right? Like unless you're somebody in the British government who can become prime minister and give a shit, which you're not, then it really comes down to that, right? It's the Nietzsche assertion of self, and if you're an artist, then that's really good news for you. If you're not, then support your artist or some shit. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting about the only thing to do is sort of self expression in a way. I mean, you're right. The narratives definitely like need to happen, and I think that I don't know. It is weird reading. How are you finding reading books these days? Like, have you been reading any novels?
Yeah. I have Twitter brain. Like I go offline a lot, and as soon as I'm off Twitter, I read a lot more.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
was just talking to
more
my dad about this. My dad's a big reader. His whole life has been reading books. He's a big book guy.
right.
And I was just talking to him about this. And it's like there's something about there's something about the scroll that destroys the novelistic perspective. And I think not enough has been really like written about or thought about on this. But like I tried watching this movie the other day. Have you ever seen the movie The Player? It's like a Altman movie. It's with
I think I have.
Tim Robbins plays this like you know like a agent, like a movie agent type of guy,
Yeah,
basically.
I saw this like back in the day. I haven't seen it a long time though.
Yeah. So, um, uh, yeah. So like I tried watching this, and it's very novelistic, and it's very tongue in cheek, uh, and it's very like, oh, this is the real life of one of these guys. It's the real life of a successful
Right.
movie guy.
Right.
And I don't know what it is. There's just something like there's something about the immediacy of the scroll. There's something about the immediacy of the world of the content that we get on a day-to-day basis that like destroys. It's like destructive to that type of novelistic writing. And
I
I don't mean
will
the type of stuff that you like. The stuff that you write is much more, I think, actually suited for today's world because it's got a strong mystery and it's more hard boiled type of stuff. Whoa, this is crazy. There's like a crazy like blimp outside my window. That's weird. Literally never seen that before. What the fuck is that? Um, that's fucking really weird. What does that say?
no, but
Uh,
I think I have a perfect answer to this. To be honest with you,
yeah, go
I
for it.
think that when I talked about regional localization of narratives and culture coming into contact with one another, the novel was localized experience. And so this goes back not just in the David Foster Wallace maximalism mind of a genius way, but it was to participate in a localized narrative, usually involving the interiority of a character. And so it's not scrolling per se. what it is that these narratives, like your experience as a human being, is no longer localized, and your experience of other people is not localized either. And even commenting, like, you know, when you mentioned like give up the ghost, right? Like, I wrote it like on its surface, like I offered it an idea, a theory of time inside of Give Up the Ghost, which was man-made loops on the eternal timeline, right? And so what I did with the structure, the first two chapters of Give Up the Ghost are sort of like classic. I mean, and I mean the prose is great, right? But they're supposed to be cliche, right? It's a Southern narrative. The first two chapters and the last two chapters, and then everything in between is basically the main character on the pursuit for a killer having like this schizo mystical experience, akin to Pilgrim's Progress, to where he's a pure character coming into constant contact with these narratives and these offerings for basically like life and death in the context of the story. And and I wrote it in such a way that and you know, and I think the people that really like got it said as such, where it was a kind of schizophrenic experience for them, to where, and I think that was the attempt with the book, to not only the beauty of prose, but to lay an entire lens on these narratives that people are that the main character is encompassing, right? And so it is in the middle. The majority of the book is exactly that, right? It's what I've been talking about. But and that was the attempt, was not to localize the narrative, right? But by doing prose and by offering the lens that the main character has on these experiences, then the reader experiences that as well. And I think that's sort of taking it back to where the postmodernists, you know, Barth and, you know, Pynchon, et cetera, right? The structuralist guys, what they were doing is they were kind of raping the reader, right? They were like pointing out, like, yes, you are, you know, witnessing a rape, right? You are witnessing abuse. You know, it's a finger pointed back at the reader, right? Rather than a finger pointed out. And I think that, you know, whether it can be done through the written word for anyone, you know, under the age of 15 when they grow older, maybe not. But I told a friend of mine online about some of the ideas, right, as far as like the assertion of self, and the way he put it was, if we're all the raped, then basically you have to become like a power bottom. And
that's good.
You know, so if we are subjected, right, if we're all subjected to this thing, right, and that's the true horror of what we live in. But this is, once again, I tweeted out that, like, it's when Brian Johnson, who I think is a great poster, but like when he was talking about when he did shrooms, right, and I was like, I said, like, Silicon Valley has even made drugs lame, right, and it sucks that we're living in a world that is engineered by lames. And that's, like, dude, they have, Silicon Valley has the hackable thing, right? Like, everything's hacked. Your biology can be hacked. Gen X, you know, is scared shitless of dying, and they're scared to hack. You know, they're hacking everything. But if you go the other route, right? If you know how it works, whether it's meta narratives, whether it's algorithm, like, you can. This is the self assertion, right? Like, that's why I'm so adamant. Why I opened up the whole thing with like these huge freaking narratives that can sort of guide life. This is the actual railways. And I think that, but anyway, even as the novel, right, like, nothing is localized anymore. Like, that's really what it comes down to. And
and it's all dependent on context, right? It's hyper contextual, and that's why you know, the comedy doesn't exist anymore, because comedy is now just quips. It's a hyper meta, self-aware quips. That's what comedy is.
Because you can't comment on local experience, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. But I think what's about to happen is, I think basically, like, the left is about to completely take control again. of culture. They're about to just completely dominate. And their whole thing right now is all about like kind of like it's economic. Oh yeah, dude, there's a fucking blimp. I so my thing looks over the fucking like Pasadena, like the mountains, and there's a fucking bright orange blimp that says Marty Supreme on it, which is the
Oh, that's
movie.
that's the new
The
what's his face movie?
A24
Chalamet.
Dude,
Have you followed
so
that marketing
stupid.
campaign?
No, but it's
Have you followed
good,
the
right? It's
marketing
like
campaign for that, dude?
no, I
No,
heard
check
about
it
it though.
out,
It's
man.
like
Like he's doing some internet shit. I'll put it that way.
yeah, right. That's really funny.
Very
It's like
millennial
literally
though,
like
funny
going
enough.
by. It's I've never seen anything like this. It's like going by. It's literally going by outside my window right now. That's so fucking weird. That's like really funny. I guess you got to give it to him for doing that. That's really funny. That's so funny. Anyway, their whole thing, this new brand of leftism, is going to be edgy in all of these new ways. I mean, talking about subversion, talk about subversion, right? This whole new approach is going to be all about more dismantling.
What are they
But
going to
this
dismantle, though?
what
What are they
what?
going to dismantle at this point?
Yeah, well, right, but they're going to try to dismantle, um, like landlords and healthcare, and they're going to try to dismantle billionaires. Like
Sure,
they're going to
sure.
be legitimately actually left wing, which is actually very refreshing, right? I mean, in a way that it's like, okay, well,
They're not
I'm
pretending anymore.
glad. Yeah, they're not pretending, right? They're not pretending anymore. Now they're like, all right, we're just going to be fucking communists, right? We're going to stop talking
Right,
about
right.
race. We're just going to be fucking communists. And the more communists they get, that will be how edgy they are, right? They tried
Sure.
to make being racially obsessed edgy. That's what woke was. Everybody always says, like, this is where I think most people on the right get it totally wrong, which is they think that the ideology of the managerial class or the ideology of the bad guys is woke. It's not. The people actually pulling the strings, like, the woman behind Cracker Barrel or whatever, or the woman
Right.
behind the Bud Light can, the people who run culture, she's not woke. She lives in like a fucking, they live in $20 million houses and shit. They're
Right.
not really woke.
Communism is for plebes.
Right, right. They're woke for them is flavor packets. Right? Like woke
Sure,
woke is the
sure.
flavor. It's like the sprinkles, on the dish. And now those obviously that was so offensive to so many people, that woke shit, that now the sprinkles on the dish from the people who run culture is now going to be all economic. Everything is going to be about let's kill the billionaires, basically.
I mean, culturally too.
Yeah, that's going to be we're going to we're now entering this period where we kind of left off in Occupy Wall Street, however long
Right.
ago, where that kind of got pinned, right? And there was like 20 years of woke in between, and now we're going to go back to that. Now we're going to like kind of start off where we left off with economic criticism being
Well,
the sort of cool thing of the day, I would say.
sure, sure. Well, that's interesting too because it seems to align with projected economic futures, right? And so it's almost too cliche. It's not fun to say that the culture and the media acts as an outlet for the anger of the populace. Um, and so I'm wondering if it's going to be something more akin to that, to where because that's also the thing, right? Whether it's communism or whether it's national socialism in some form, right? The whole point is, like I said, the destruction of narratives leads to attempts at solidarity. And I think that the thing that, like, people don't realize, like, if you adopt communism, someone still has to hand out the bread equally, right? People forget that shit. Someone has to control the resources that make sure they're distributed.
Yeah.
And so see, that's going to be interesting, because I think of things as like, so the final boss of wokery, I think, was trannies, right, rather than race stuff.
Yes, I think you're right. That was just one step into
Right.
something that was so uncomfortable for so many people,
Right.
that it just was
But
not really tenable.
but economics, you're not. So that was sort of a fracturing, but economics is much more shared across, race, creed, culture, blah blah blah. So that's interesting, man. Because I get the edgy part, but I also think, like I said, there's people doing something new, right? Like, fashion really is like the apex for this for me, right? Like, when people do shit with fashion, they're trying to do something new. And so if we're returning to, and I don't even disagree with you, if we're returning to sort of the solidarity of economic loss, right, or economic status, widespread, then rather than the sort of assertion that wokeness was, it seems much more out of necessity, or even, like, I has like realism. It's more realistic, I guess. I don't know how to put it at the moment. But then I follow, like, part of my cinephilia, right, is East Asian cinema, and if you even follow sort of the Korean movies and shows that are popular, even something like Parasite, right? But like Korea is really, really crazy when it comes to this, as far as showing the disparity. And I'm not commenting on, Parasite's, the poor people were the bad people, blah blah blah. But what it is I found that when you get everything, and maybe this is because the studios are the only ones that can afford it, right? Like TV shows, whether it's, quote unquote reality TV, whether it's everything, I'll put it like this way, everything that's still within the narrative of the economic disparities that you're talking about, that are the coming, cultural narratives and political narratives, it's remarkably effective in showing. It's the same as Instagram. It's Instagram on film, right? It's showing, like, here's how rich people live, and here's, like, this really, really rich life that you cannot participate in. And, the kind of basic bitch response is, oh, it's demoralization, right? But I think what it is it becomes gatekeeping, right? It's I mean, you go land, it's just capitalism, right? It's the capitalist impetus to, this is how rich people live, and so that's how I'm supposed to do it. And so, even more so than being like this nefarious, and they are, at like a plebe level, anti-natalist thing. I mean, like, you can take all this shit, dude. As soon as if you imagine the elites as the elites versus, okay, yes, this is eugenics. No, we're up here, you're down there. We don't want you to have more kids, right? Like, it's all the same shit. And so with the portrayal, because I've never seen the amount of, like, wealth displayed in media as I have in the past, like, 5 years. Like, the displays of wealth are everywhere. And a lot could be said about why, but I think it certainly is sort of a contribution. It's a state of the world thing. It's a contribution to why we're going to go into economic policies. It's capitalism at work. So yeah. I mean, I can see it across the board, really.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. Anything to shill before you get out of here?
Yeah, sure. I have my book, Give Up the Ghost. Tell people to push through the first couple chapters.
Somebody was just saying how much they like it on Twitter.
Like, the people that have said anything have said really good things. I haven't had a lot of people shit on it. I think if I ever have any success, like, just the pipe dream thing, it would be more of a Chuck Palahniuk than anything else. It's going to be some sort of cult following. But then my Substack, please call me Christ.substack.com. It's PLZ for please. I've been kind of like making fun of autofiction and doing like these random gonzo things.
Yeah.
Which started out like going to Wicked Part 1 last year. And then but I hate autofiction. When we talk about that, like localized experience, people can only follow eyes.
Oh my god,
this
the worst
person.
thing in the
At
world.
this
I know
point,
the
eyes
autofictions.
can-
Yeah. Oh my god, so great.
So the gonzo stuff is kind of, I think it's a fun take on that. And then part 1 and part 2, those essays I talked about, hopefully by the beginning of the year, like first quarter 2026. But that's the aesthetics of accelerationism, part 1 and 2. The first is techno-creationism versus techno-Taoism, and part 2 is the absolution of self.
Yeah.
So something to look forward to.
Cool, man. Well, thanks so much for joining, and stay in touch. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. It's fun.
For sure, dude. Peace.
Peace.